Welcome to the Dub Dive. This is where we plunge into a stack of compelling sources and really pull out the most surprising, sometimes mind-bending insights, all custom-tailored for your curious mind.
That's right.
Today we're diving into something, well, paradoxical. It's as ancient as humanity itself. This deep, almost stubborn human longing for truth. I mean, why do we hunger for it?
Mhm.
Why do we grieve when it's hidden? And maybe the biggest question, if evolution supposedly sculpts us purely for survival, why do we chase something that can be so incredibly dangerous? Something that can cost us everything?
It seems counterintuitive.
Totally. So we're starting this deep dive with a really unexpected scientific finding, one that dramatically challenges our basic assumptions about perception, about evolution itself.
Yeah, it really turns things on their head.
And then we're going to connect that finding to these really profound, ancient spiritual insights about what it actually means to be, you know, in tune with reality.
It's a fascinating connection.
It really is. It's a journey from the mechanics of how we perceive right into the
Yeah.
very nature of the soul.
And our mission for this deep dive really is to unpack what we're calling spiritual mechanics. We want to explore how these age-old spiritual truths can be understood, maybe even illuminate our modern inner world using scientific analogies that are, frankly, astonishingly apt.
Right, like seeing old wisdom in a new light.
Exactly. We're talking about understanding the deep architecture of being, but, seen through this fresh, illuminating lens.
And our primary source for this is a truly thought-provoking piece. Chapter 3, Sin in the Nature of Dissonance, HoffmanUpdate.pdf. It's just packed with insights that bridge contemporary science and timeless spirituality
Maybe like that.
in a way that really challenges your deepest preconceptions. So get ready for a deep dive that might just shift how you see, well, pretty much everything.
Okay.
All right, let's unpack this fascinating paradox. Our common sense, it tells us something pretty intuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah, seems obvious.
When we think about evolution, this incredible process of natural selection, we just assume it would inherently favor organisms that perceive reality accurately.
Stands to reason. See things right, survive better.
Exactly. It just makes sense. If you're a gazelle trying to escape a lion, wouldn't seeing the lion exactly as it is give you the best chance?
You'd think so. Clearer picture, better escape plan.
Or if you're a creature searching for food, wouldn't an accurate map of your environment be the ultimate survival tool? It feels like perceiving truth should be evolution's #1 job.
It absolutely does feel that way. And honestly, for a very long time, that was the prevailing scientific assumption. It's sort of the default setting for how we thought about it.
Right.
And this is where Dr. Donald Hoffman comes in. He's a cognitive scientist at UC Irvine. And he spent years meticulously studying perception and evolution.
Okay.
Like most scientists in the field, he started out with that same firm belief. Evolution designs organisms to see the world accurately. It seemed almost self-evident,
Yeah.
a basic principle.
A cornerstone, almost. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this is the twist.
Dr. Hoffman and his colleagues, they didn't just accept this assumption. They did what good scientists do. They tested it rigorously.
They put it through its paces.
They ran these detailed mathematical simulations of evolutionary competition. They basically built virtual worlds, populated them with competing organisms,
Mm-hmm.
and programmed those organisms with different ways of seeing, different perceptual strategies. They wanted to see, in a controlled, scientific way, if truthful perception really gave a survival advantage.
It was a groundbreaking approach, really trying to pin down this long-held belief.
What happened?
Well, the results were, as the source puts it, startling. What they found was precisely the opposite of that intuitive assumption.
Opposite.
Yeah, time and time again, across thousands of these simulations, this consistent and frankly counterintuitive pattern emerged. Organisms that perceived reality truthfully.
The ones we thought would win.
Right. They were repeatedly outcompeted. They were driven to extinction. They just couldn't survive.
Wow. Driven to extinction for seeing the truth. That's wild.
It really is.
Yeah.
So the natural question is, who won? Who thrived in these virtual worlds?
Yeah. Who are the survivors?
The organisms that consistently won, the ones that survived and flourished, were those that perceived only what was useful for survival.
Useful, not accurate.
Exactly. Not what was objectively accurate about reality, but what was fitness enhancing. So in other words, if seeing a simplified, maybe even a distorted version of reality helped them find food faster or avoid predators more quickly,
Uh-huh.
they outlasted the truth perceivers every single time. Speed and utility beat accuracy.
That's almost shocking, isn't it? It goes against everything we think we know.
Completely.
Dr. Hoffman summed it up pretty bluntly, didn't he?
He did. His conclusion was stark. Natural selection favors perceptions that are fitness-enhancing, not truth-revealing.
Fitness enhancing, not truth revealing.
Well, and he offers this really powerful analogy to help us get our heads around this revolutionary idea. He suggests reality isn't like a window we look through to see the world directly.
Right, not a clear pane of glass.
No, it's more like a user interface.
Like a computer screen.
Exactly. Think of your smartphone or your computer desktop.
Yeah.
You tap on an icon, right, to open an app or a file.
Yeah.
You're not seeing the incredibly complex machinery inside the device. The microchips, the wiring, the millions of lines of code running underneath.
No, of course not. Just the pretty icon.
Right. You're interacting with a simplified, functional representation.
Yeah.
That icon doesn't show you the truth of what's happening under the hood. It just lets you do something useful, achieve a goal, open a file, send the message, play the game.
And Hoffman's saying, we are like that. Our perception works like that user interface.
That's exactly his point. We, as human beings, are basically wired the same way. We aren't built to see the complex machinery of objective reality itself. It might be too much, too slow, too costly.
So we get the simplified version.
We get the version that helps us survive within it. We interact with reality's icons, food, danger, mates, in a way that maximizes our chances of passing on our genes. It's almost like evolution gave us this highly effective but maybe deeply misleading cheat sheet for reality.
That fundamentally challenges, well, everything about how we think we perceive the world.
It really does. It forces us to ask some deep questions. If evolution is all about survival, and it actively disfavors truthful perception, because truth can be costly, complex, slow to process,
Then why?
then why on earth do we, humans, still have this paradoxical, deep longing for it? What is this profound, undeniable human yearning for something that, by all evolutionary accounts, should have been filtered out of our genes ages ago?
If it's not for survival, what is it for? Where does it come from?
That's the mystery.
And that leads us straight into the second part of this paradox, which is just as compelling, this enduring enigma of the human heart. Because despite Hoffman's findings, despite what evolution seems to favor, there remains this profound, undeniable human longing for truth. It's a real mystery, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it's not just casual curiosity.
No, we hunger for it. That's the word the source uses, in a way that goes way beyond just utility. We grieve when truth is hidden or obscured.
Yeah, we feel that loss.
And incredibly, we risk everything, our reputation, our comfort, even our lives to pursue it. That doesn't sound very fitness-enhancing.
Not at all. Think about the examples the source gives. They're powerful, almost archetypal.
Like the scientist.
Exactly. Scientists spending a lifetime peering into the cosmos, meticulously gathering data, rigorously testing hypotheses, driven by this insatiable need to uncover objective truth.
Even if it has no immediate practical benefit.
Right. No matter how distant or abstract it seems, they pour their lives into discovering how the universe truly works, even if that knowledge doesn't help them find their next meal or avoid a predator.
Or, even more dramatically, the martyr.
Yes, the martyr standing firm before the sword, choosing truth over comfort, truth over safety, truth over life itself.
Those aren't just isolated incidents either, are they?
Not at all. The human story, across every culture, every century, is filled with people who exemplified this profound, costly yearning. If evolution pushes us away from truth, where does this desperate pull towards it come from?
It's the core of the paradox.
It really is. If pure survival was the only goal of evolution, and if seeing truth actually reduces survival chances, as Hoffman's simulations suggest,
Then this yearning should have been weeded out.
it should have been discarded. Why do we continue to ache for something that, from a purely biological standpoint, looks like a liability?
So where does the source suggest the answer lies?
Well, it argues that the answer must lie deeper than biology, deeper than evolution, deeper even than survival itself.
Okay, so not just a brain quirk, not just culture.
No, something more fundamental.
Yeah.
It posits that if this deep longing for truth can't be explained by our biology or evolutionary history, that it must be the signature of something deeper, something woven into the very structure of reality itself.
Woven into reality, that's a big idea.
It is. This is where we move from the purely scientific into something more profound, maybe metaphysical. The source suggests that before there was biology, there was being.
Okay.
Before there was survival, there was meaning. And before there was creation, there was the Word, the Logos, through whom all things were made.
The logos. the divine word, the underlying pattern or reason behind everything.
Exactly, that deep structure of reality.
So our longing for truth, it's like a memory or an echo.
That's precisely how the Source frames it. In this context, the human soul's yearning for truth, even though it's costly and counter-survival, is presented as an echo of this deeper resonance.
Wow.
It's described as the memory of a field that once sang in perfect harmony.
A memory of harmony.
Yes, and this really sets the stage for this incredibly compelling idea that the universe itself isn't silent or static. It's a grand resonant system, a living symphony.
And our longing for truth.
It's our deep internal compass trying to point us back to that original perfect melody, that harmony we somehow remember.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Building on that powerful idea of the universe as a resonant system, a symphony.
Yeah, this connection is key.
The Source opens this next section with that beautiful, profound quote from St. Augustine. Our hearts are restless until they rest in thee.
A classic, very powerful.
But it emphasizes, look, this isn't just lovely poetry, something nice to think about or a comforting sentiment. It's presented as describing the deep architecture of being.
So not just how we feel, but how things are.
Exactly, a fundamental truth about how reality is structured.
And the core idea flowing from that is that there's this tangible vibration, an underlying harmonic structure that animates all of creation.
A tangible vibration, like a hum beneath everything.
Sort of. Imagine the universe not as just a collection of objects sitting there silently, but as this dynamic living symphony of interwoven patterns and frequencies. Everything is connected through vibration.
The Source really leans into this, doesn't it?
It does. It says, from the orbits of planets to the firing of neurons, from the spin of electrons to the beating of hearts, the universe is not silent. It sings, it pulses, it resonates.
Wow. So it's not just poetic language.
The argument is no, it's suggesting a fundamental principle of existence. Everything is vibrating. Everything is in a state of dynamic oscillation. And critically, these oscillations are meant to align, to harmonize.
And the consequence of this underlying harmony, or lack of it, is huge.
Absolutely huge. It's presented like a cosmic law. When this resonance is honored, when everything aligns with this deep song of being, life flourishes. It thrives.
Like an ecosystem in balance or a healthy body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But conversely, when this resonance is disrupted, when the harmony is broken, disorder inevitably enters. Chaos creeps in.
And this applies physically and theologically.
Yes, that's the crucial bridge the Source makes. This principle holds true on a physical level, like think of a bridge vibrating out of control, and also on a theological level. It unifies these seemingly separate domains.
Which brings us directly to how the Christian tradition understands sin.
Right. And in this framework, sin isn't just breaking a rule or a simple moral mistake. It's understood fundamentally as the rupture of a relationship,
A break in connection.
a separation, a profound disordering. The Source uses Augustine's language, aversio ideo.
Turning away from God.
Yes, turning away from the ultimate source of that harmony, that resonance. And at the same time, it's a conversio ad creaturum.
Turning towards the created thing instead.
Exactly. Focusing on what's temporal, fleeting, rather than the eternal, the foundational source. In this twofold turning, the soul forfeits its proper orientation.
It loses its direction.
It loses its proper alignment. It doesn't cease to exist, obviously, but critically, it ceases to resonate. It falls out of phase with the one who called it into being.
Out of phase, like a sound wave that's off.
Precisely. Your inner tuning fork loses its connection to the master pitch. And building on that, St. Thomas Aquinas framed sin as actus inordinatus.
A disordered act.
A disordered act. He saw it as departing from the rational order God established. A rupture in the soul's alignment with its ultimate end, its telos, its purpose, its goal.
Okay, but if we push beyond the abstract idea of disorder, what is it, really?
Well, the Source offers a powerful insight here. Disorder isn't just moral failure. Fundamentally, it's a misalignment of form, a distortion of pattern.
A distortion of pattern. Like static on a clear channel.
That's a great way to put it. And if we connect that back to the bigger picture, the universe as this resonant system, then this abstract idea of disorder becomes almost physical. Disorder in this sense is dissonance.
Dissonance, like in music.
Exactly like in music. It's the soul's music falling out of tune. Imagine a beautiful symphony, and suddenly there's this jarring, clashing chord.
Yeah, it hurts your ears.
Right. Musically, dissonance is when tones clash. Harmonic patterns drift away from consonants, that pleasing, stable harmony, into tension. The frequencies interfere instead of enriching each other.
It destabilizes the whole song.
Precisely. It jars the ear, destabilizes the structure, and the source makes the direct link. And so too does sin disrupt the song of the soul.
Wow. That transforms sin from just a moral concept into something almost physical, something you can feel is off-key.
It really does. It gives it a tangible quality.
So let's take Aquinas' idea of the form of the soul, its essence, its inner structure. The source suggests viewing this not as static, but dynamically.
Yeah, through the lens of quantum oscillation, actually. It proposes thinking of the soul as a waveform.
A waveform, like light or sound.
Exactly. A resonant field pattern uniquely tuned to the logos. Think of it like your soul has a specific musical signature, a unique frequency designed to harmonize perfectly with the divine frequency.
Okay, so in its proper state.
In its ideal, proper state, this waveform vibrates in perfect harmony with God. It creates a beautiful, coherent signal, a clear, pure note in the universal symphony.
But sin messes that up.
That's the impact of sin in this model. It shifts the phase of this waveform, it blurs the signal.
Plus the phase, like throwing the timing off.
Yeah, or like adding noise. The image of God within the soul, that core pattern, it's not erased, but it gets muffled, scattered, clouded by interference.
Like a radio signal full of static.
Exactly. Or a perfect picture suddenly becoming pixelated. The original broadcast, the pure image, it's still there, but it's hard to make out, hard to experience clearly.
And this leads to a really striking definition of sin.
It does. Sin, in its most fundamental expression, is described as resonance drift.
Resonance drift, I like that.
It's defined as a measurable, if still mysterious, departure from divine coherence. A phase mismatch between the soul's unique oscillation pattern and the divine field it's meant to tune into.
So it's less about judgment and more a description of a state, like being off-key.
Precisely. Your inner music is just slightly off from the master tune.
And the effects start small.
They begin subtly. You might not even notice at first. The source mentions a gentle discord, a shadow of unease, a quiet dimming of purpose.
That feeling when something just doesn't quite click anymore?
Exactly. When joy feels a bit hollow or clarity seems elusive. But, and this is crucial, if this resonance drift isn't corrected, it compounds. It gets worse over time.
It spirals.
It spirals into fragmentation. The self starts to fracture, experiencing internal conflict, incoherence. Clarity gives way to confusion. Purpose fades into apathy. Harmony becomes static.
And eventually,
what was once a vibrant signal of grace can collapse into what the source calls spiritual entropy.
entropy, like the universe tending towards disorder.
Exactly. A state of increasing disorder, degradation, a complete loss of spiritual vitality.
This is where the source makes that really bold claim.
Yeah, the provocative point. This is not mere metaphor. This is spiritual mechanics.
Spiritual mechanics? Wow.
It's suggesting that what mystics intuited, what theologians taught for centuries about sin and salvation,
Yeah.
it's now starting to be echoed by insights from physics.
So reality, both spiritual and material, is structured by rhythm, pattern, phase.
That's the idea. And therefore, sin isn't just a failure of will or breaking rules as we often think of it. Fundamentally, it's a failure of alignment.
A soul out of tune with its source.
Losing its capacity to sing the song it was created to sing.
And just like an instrument needs a standard to tune to,
Right, a tuning fork, a reference pitch, an external signal.
the soul can't recalibrate its waveform without grace.
Exactly. This spiritual mechanics framework gives us a compelling way to understand not just the problem of sin, but the path to restoration.
It shifts the question, doesn't it, from how do I stop doing bad things?
To how do I get back in tune? How do I restore that lost resonance?
So, okay, what does this all mean for us practically in our day-to-day lives? How does this abstract stuff ground itself in our experience?
Well, the source really brings it down to earth. It reiterates that idea. Every single soul is a harmonic field, a structured waveform.
Tuned to the logos.
Ideally, yes, tuned to the frequency of the logos, designed to sing with beauty, goodness, truth, like a perfectly tuned violin string, ready for the concert.
But,
Right.
like the finest instruments, the soul is also fragile. It's free. It can choose to drift. And critically, it's always under pressure.
Pressure from what?
It's vulnerable to both environmental and internal dissonance. It's constantly bombarded by forces that can pull it off key.
And these dissonant fields, what are they in concrete terms?
The source points to common human experiences we all recognize. Persistent temptation, unresolved trauma, the constant overwhelming noise of modern life.
Yeah, 247 input.
Exactly. The pull of addiction, whether it's substances or behaviors, and the subtle corrosion of pride. In this framework, these aren't just moral distractions.
They're literal dissonant fields.
That's how they're described. They actively interfere with the soul's resonance. They pull it out of phase. The waveform starts to drift, to scatter.
And the result is sin, a state of being out of tune.
Exactly.
It's amazing how the word sin itself supports this idea.
The etymology, yeah, it's fascinating.
In Hebrew, chata, and Greek, hamartia, both can mean missing the mark.
Like an archery. Right. An archery term. It wasn't always about deliberate evil, but about misalignment. The archer aims, draws the bow.
But the arrow misses the center.
It flies, but it doesn't land where intended. And the source draws the parallel. The human soul desires truth. It's aimed toward God. It longs for that resonance. But its trajectory has been pulled askew by forces both visible and invisible. It's like a bowstring that's gone slack, or maybe the target itself is moving.
That's a powerful image. And in physics, we see this exact dynamic playing out with striking clarity in oscillatory systems.
Things that move in cycles or waves.
Right. Anything that moves in repeating cycles, a pendulum swinging, an atom vibrating, these systems are known to be exquisitely sensitive to external influence.
They need stability.
They need incredible stability to maintain their coherence, their rhythm. And when that stability is lost, or when they're isolated, their rhythm inevitably starts to decay. They drift.
Okay, let's look at some of those physical examples. They really make it tangible. The synchronized metronomes one is classic.
It really is. So picture several metronomes. If you put them on a solid, unmoving table and start them at different
They
times,
just tick away randomly, out of sync.
completely out of sync.
Yeah.
But now put them all on a shared movable platform. The classic experiment uses a wooden board balanced on soda cans.
Okay.
Start them out of sync again. Within minutes, something amazing happens. They start to synchronize.
They all start clicking together.
Perfectly in unison.
Yeah.
Perfectly aligned.
How does that work?
That shared platform acts as a feedback medium. The tiny vibrations from each metronome travel through the board and influence the others. They sort of nudge each other into rhythm until this collective coherence emerges.
Wow.
It's a powerful demo of how interconnected systems find harmony. But here's the crucial lesson for us.
What happens if you take away the board?
Exactly. If you sever that connection, remove the shared platform, even that perfectly ordered system immediately begins to drift back out of sync.
So the takeaway is,
Resonance requires relationship. If you isolate an oscillator, it loses its tune. Connection is key for maintaining harmony.
another striking example, lasers.
Yeah, lasers are fascinating in this context. A laser isn't just any light.
It's focused.
It's light brought into phase. Unlike a regular light bulb spraying photons randomly, a laser emits photons that are in perfect sync, identical wavelength, frequency, direction.
total coherence. That's what gives it its power.
Precisely. Pure, coherent light. But these highly ordered systems are also highly vulnerable.
So noise.
Exactly. Lasers are highly sensitive to noise. Introduce even a tiny disruption, a bit of heat, some electromagnetic interference, instability in the laser material itself.
And the coherence breaks down.
Instantly, the coherence collapses.
Yeah.
What was a sharp, focused beam becomes scattered and diffuse, like a pure signal dissolving into static. The energy is still there, but it's no longer ordered.
And even our most precise clocks show this drift, atomic clocks.
Even them. These are marvels using the natural vibration of atoms, cesium, rubidium, to keep time with unbelievable accuracy.
Like losing a second every million years, right?
Some are even better now, just staggering precision. Yet, even they face this constant subtle battle against drift.
They still wander off.
If they aren't periodically recalibrated to a universal standard like the International Atomic Time, TAI signal they inevitably begin to diverge.
Why?
Their incredibly stable atomic oscillation is still subject to tiny environmental shifts. Minute changes in magnetic fields, gravity, even cosmic rays hitting the atoms. All these things nudge it slowly out of sync.
So the drift is always happening, even if it's tiny.
It's constant, it's a fundamental principle. Without that constant external reference point, even the most perfect system eventually starts to wander. There's no perfect isolation.
And maybe the most relatable example is us, our own bodies. circadian rhythms.
Absolutely. Our bodies have these intricate internal clocks
Yeah.
run by oscillating gene expression, and they're regulated mainly by light exposure.
They control sleep, mood, hormones.
Cognitive function, metabolism, so much. They keep our inner symphony playing at the right tempo, synced with the 24-hour day.
But what happens when we lose those external cues? Like light.
Right. When humans are removed from cues like daylight and regular social interaction, think astronauts on long missions or people in deep underground isolation studies.
Their rhythms go haywire.
They quickly begin to fragment. They lose that natural entrainment with the solar cycle. Sleep patterns get disrupted, cognition fades, mood drops, depression often sets in.
And that's not just psychological.
At its core, it's described as a breakdown of oscillatory coherence. The internal clocks lose their synchrony.
So all these examples, metronomes, lasers, atomic clocks, our own bodies.
They all point to this universal principle. Complex systems drift. They lose their coherence if they're not consistently linked to a stabilizing source, a reference point.
Which really raises that important question. If physical systems are so prone to drift, what does that tell us about the human soul's tendency to wander, to fall out of tune?
It suggests it's not just a moral issue, but maybe a fundamental aspect of being a complex open system in the universe.
Which leads to this powerful, maybe even humbling realization. This drift we feel, this sense of being off-key or disconnected. It isn't primarily a moral failing in the usual sense.
Right. It's presented as much as a natural, almost physical tendency. It's inherent in complex systems. It's kind of the universe's default setting, if you will, the pull towards entropy.
So, resonance drift. Oh, let's define that again.
It's the gradual degradation of coherence in an oscillatory system that is no longer entrained to a stabilizing source.
No longer connected to that tuning fork.
Exactly. And here's the insight that can be quite freeing.
Mhm.
It's not a failure of design. Your soul isn't inherently flawed or broken.
Okay.
It's described as the natural outcome of entropy in open systems. That law that says everything left alone tends toward disorder, decay, scatter.
So left unchecked, systems wander.
All such systems, no matter how perfect initially, will wander. Their waveforms scatter. Cycles distort. Resonance dissolves into chaos. It's just the natural flow towards disorder.
So it's almost inevitable for us, too,
Yeah.
applying this to the soul.
Well, if we understand the soul as this oscillatory field within a divine harmonic structure, then yes, it seems subject to these same principles. Without consistent entrainment,
Which means?
which the source defines as actively connecting through seeking truth, experiencing beauty, acts of love, prayer, the sacraments, without that consistent connection,
The waveform drifts.
the soul's waveform begins to drift, and sin, in this view, gets reframed again. Not just moral transgression, but phase incoherence.
The soul losing its signal.
Exactly. Still broadcasting, but the message is getting garbled, full of static.
Okay, if that's the case, then the role of spiritual practices changes. It's not just about behavior correction.
No, it's about something far more fundamental: to restore frequency,
To retune the instrument.
to bring it back into alignment with its original intended pitch, its true song.
This casts those practices in such a fascinating new light. The liturgy.
The consistent pattern of worship becomes a metronome, a reliable rhythmic beat, helping synchronize the soul, bringing it back to a shared tempo.
And the sacrament.
Described as a resynchronization protocol, like precise actions designed to bring us back into alignment, like hitting reset on a wandering clock.
And the church community.
It functions as that shared platform, like the board under the metronomes. It enables communal entrainment with the Logos, who is the ultimate source signal, the coherent frequency keeping the whole symphony in tune.
And again, the source insists, this is not metaphor.
No, it's presented as the deep physics of coherence. It offers this powerful explanation, maybe clearer than purely moral language can, of why we inevitably fall out of tune.
It's not just moral weakness, it's living in an entropic universe.
Right. And crucially, it explains why we inherently need something outside ourselves to draw us back into alignment. We can't self-tune indefinitely. We need that external reference point.
But there's another critical point here, and it's kind of a sobering one.
Yes. What happens when the soul isn't in training to divine reality? When it stops harmonizing with truth, beauty, love?
It doesn't just float neutrally.
No. This is where it gets dangerous. It begins, the source says, inevitably to lock onto the strongest available signal in its environment.
The loudest noise.
Basically. And the source is blunt. This is not weakness, it is physics.
Physics, how is that physics?
Well, think about forced oscillation. In any system with multiple frequencies competing, the weaker signals get absorbed or overtaken by the stronger one.
Like the tuning fork example.
Exactly. Strike one tuning fork, put it near another of the same pitch, and soon both vibrate. The vibration of one compels the other. But this applies to any dominant frequency, not just harmonious ones.
Your internal rhythm falls in step with the loudest drum beat.
Eventually, yes.
The Tacoma Narrows Bridge disaster is such a chilling example of this.
It really is. That bridge didn't collapse from faulty engineering or one huge wind gust. It was resonance.
A gentle wind.
A steady, gentle wind, perfectly matched to the bridge's natural frequency, just kept feeding energy into the system. The oscillations got bigger and bigger.
Until catastrophic failure.
Exactly. And the lesson is stark and applies right to our inner lives. Sustained exposure to even a subtle force, if matched to your resonance, can reshape and ultimately destroy you.
Wow, that's heavy.
It highlights why oscillatory systems, including us humans, have to be extremely careful about what they entrain to.
It gives new depth to that old wisdom, you are the company you keep.
Precisely. Because the soul, as an open system, does not exist in isolation. It's always resonating with something, always picking up a signal.
So the default path becomes clear.
Frighteningly clear. If the soul is not intentionally entraining to the logos, actively choosing connection through prayer, truth, beauty, sacraments, love, then it will, by default, entrain to the loudest, strongest, or most persistent signals in its field.
And those signals.
Sadly, as the source notes, those signals are often chaotic, misaligned, or even destructive.
Think about the examples given.
They resonate powerfully today. A child raised in constant violence where anger and fear are the main frequencies.
Or a mind saturated in the noise of social media.
Yeah, the fragmented, often aggressive signals there. Or a soul shaped by scarcity, deep shame, unresolved trauma.
These aren't neutral environments.
They are fields, and every field has a frequency.
Exactly. And those frequencies exert this powerful, almost gravitational pull. They draw you into their rhythm.
Now, this doesn't negate free will, right? We still make choices.
Absolutely. We choose what we attend to, what we feed our minds and hearts. But, and this is crucial, the source stresses that the playing field is not flat.
Meaning?
The louder the noise around you, the harder it is to hear that clear, pure signal of truth and grace. The more time you spend away from the tuning fork of grace.
The more the dissonance feels normal.
Exactly. Those unhealthy rhythms, anxiety, cynicism, despair, start to feel familiar. What began as a drift becomes the new normal, maybe even feels like home.
This really calls for humility, doesn't it?
Profound humility. It reminds us sin isn't always conscious rebellion. Often it's the unconscious result of misalignment, a soul pulled by gravity toward whatever force is nearest. So when someone falls into addiction, bitterness, vanity, despair,
We don't excuse the behavior, obviously. But we can see it with more clarity, maybe more compassion. They aren't just choosing darkness.
they are resonating with it.
They've become entrained to a dissonant frequency. And that frequency is now shaping their very being, their music.
And yet, here is the profound hope. Despite all this drift, this dissonance,
Yes, despite how deep it can go, how far out of tune a soul can drift, the powerful message is resonance can be restored.
the original melody isn't truly lost.
That's the core truth here. The soul remains capable of coherence. The original signature is never lost, only muffled beneath the static.
Like that radio station still broadcasting just needs tuning in.
Exactly. The signal is still there, waiting to be heard again.
And when the logos, the divine word, that ultimate coherent source, when it's reintroduced into the soul's field,
Even the most shattered waveform can begin to retune. It's this powerful image of restoration. No matter how fractured, the fundamental capacity for harmony is still there.
like a broken instrument still holding the potential for music.
Perfectly put. And this is presented as why Jesus spent so much time with those considered sinners.
He didn't just offer forgiveness.
Though that was vital, he offered resonance. His very presence acted as the tuning fork, a perfect, unwavering pitch in a discordant world,
His words were coherence.
cutting through the noise. His love was the signal stronger than any other, powerful enough to drown out the static.
And you saw the transformation.
Absolutely. The source reminds us, those who once vibrated with fear, shame, hatred, tax collectors, prostitutes, zealots, even murderers,
Under his influence.
they began to resonate with something higher, something purer, whole. The original song started to emerge again.
It really makes you stop and ask yourself, you, the listener, what are we harmonizing with?
Yeah, in our daily lives.
Right.
Because whether we realize it or not, We are always in entrainment.
And the soul.
Like every oscillator in creation will eventually become what it resonates with. You become the music you listen to internally.
This also sheds light on why theology talks about habitual sin.
Right. It's not just repeating bad actions. In this framework, habitual sin is recalibration, a slow reshaping of the soul's waveform around distortion.
So the longer it goes uncorrected.
The harder it becomes to even remember what true resonance felt like.
Yeah.
Harmony feels unfamiliar. Peace feels uncomfortable. Dissonance, paradoxically, starts to feel like home because it's so familiar.
That's the fomus peccati, the tinder of sin.
Exactly. Classical theology called it that. The ember of dissonance that smolders in the human condition, always ready to reignite, always pulling you back to the distorted pattern.
In an oscillatory theory.
We could call it resonance inertia, the natural tendency of a distorted waveform to stay distorted until acted upon by an external coherent force. It's that feeling of being stuck. Even when you desperately want to change, the pattern has momentum.
And that external coherent force is grace.
That force is grace. But for grace to work, to realign the soul, there's a condition. We have to understand the gravity of the drift, how far off key we are, and crucially, we have to be willing to be tuned.
It requires receptivity.
Active receptivity. It's not passive. You have to be willing to open yourself to that retuning.
Let's go back to thermodynamics. The second law, entropy. Systems move toward disorder.
Right. Left to themselves, they decay, scatter. Order dissolves. Spiritually, the source suggests this is the soul's natural state apart from grace.
Right.
We lose coherence.
Without that regular infusion from the logos.
Without that constant connection to divine resonance, the soul inevitably loses structure. It falls apart. It entrains to lower order signals, not out of defiance, but necessity.
Because resonance needs a source.
It always seeks a source. If
That
it doesn't find the eternal, the divine, it will settle for the immediate, whatever's closest, loudest, most persistent. It has to resonate with something.
And this is the crucial turn, while the drift is natural.
It is not inevitable. That's the hope.
There's a counterforce to entropy. Syntropy.
Syntropy, exactly. That principle where some systems actually move toward greater order and coherence when influenced by a higher organizing principle, like life creating order from chaos.
And in theology, that principle is grace.
Grace is defined here as the syntropic force of the logos, a non-coercive resonant power that realigns disordered systems back toward divine coherence.
A loving pullback to our true song.
Exactly. And its nature is key. It cannot be manufactured, it cannot be controlled, and most importantly, it cannot be forced.
Why not force?
Because the soul is not a machine to be repaired. It is an instrument waiting to be retuned. You don't force a violin. You carefully, lovingly bring it into alignment.
And the instrument has to be willing.
Every instrument must be tuned willingly. That's why grace can be resisted. It's relational. It's an invitation, not a compulsion. It waits. It invites. It sings.
So receiving grace isn't just being forgiven.
Though that's part of it, beautifully so. It is fundamentally to be retuned, to allow that divine frequency to penetrate the waveform of the soul and restore harmony at every level, emotional, intellectual, physical, spiritual.
It's the shift.
From disharmony to resonance, from noise to music, from entropy to integration, from being scattered to being whole again.
So how does this actually happen tangibly? How do we participate?
This is where the sacraments come in,
Yeah.
particularly confession.
Confession. Okay, how does that fit the model?
Well, in this framework, confession isn't just psychological catharsis or just saying sins to feel better, though those might happen. It's presented as a precise act of waveform recalibration.
The field event.
The field event, a moment where the soul, through vulnerability, through speaking the truth of its condition, its dissonance, and through being receptive, it opens itself to the resonant force of grace and permits its frequencies to be realigned. You consciously allow the divine tuning fork to resonate through you.
Just like physical systems need feedback to correct.
In theology, neither do souls. You can't fix a radio without knowing what's wrong with the signal.
Confession is the feedback loop.
It is the feedback loop. It is the signal correction, the tuning fork, the entrainment event. It's the moment designed to bring the soul back into alignment with the logos.
And just like a laser needs coherence to be powerful.
The soul needs resonance to truly thrive, to be fully alive. So we return to these practices, like confession, again and again.
Not just out of guilt.
No, not primarily. Who wants to live in guilt? We return out of need.
Because we know how easy it is to drift.
We know how quickly the signal fades under the noise, the static creeps back in so easily.
We realize that living in harmony with the logos, with reality's deep song.
It takes more than just good intentions. It requires consistent tuning. It requires a commitment to truth, even when it's hard. It requires grace to pull us back.
And maybe most of all.
It requires the humility to say, I have fallen out of tune, but I long to sing again.
Wow. What an incredible journey we've taken today. I mean, from that starting paradox, why do we seek truth if evolution doesn't care about it?
Right, through Hoffman's surprising findings.
To the universe as this vibrating symphony and these really startling scientific insights that help explain why our souls naturally drift out of tune.
It's such a profound reframing, isn't it, of what it means to be human, what it means to live a life of purpose.
It really is. And it deeply reinforces the implications of seeing sin and grace, not just as, abstract moral ideas.
But as spiritual mechanics, these actual realigning forces that can bring us back into coherence with the ultimate source, with reality itself.
It shows how our inner state is fundamentally linked to this larger vibrational order.
And that our longing for truth really is that homesick echo of our original harmony, that memory of the perfect song.
So, as you, our listener, go about your day, maybe consider this provocative thought to ponder. If our very being is an orchestra of frequencies and you are the conductor of your own inner symphony,
Nice way to put it.
what practices are you cultivating? What intentional tuning are you performing day by day to ensure your instrument remains perfectly tuned to the grand, divine symphony of reality?
Great question to sit with.
Until next time, keep diving deep.